Hi, everybody. This is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio. Jeanne White is a producer and writes the blog. And I highly suggest that you read the blog because there's going to be a lot of information. And I think you should listen to the show really close because if you wonder about the side effects of medication, if you wonder if your medications are safe, you're going to want to hear my guest today. And if you miss any of this show, you can catch it again by subscribing to Spreaker, Spotify, iHeart, Google, Apple Podcasts, CastBox. And right now, it's for free. So I would take advantage of it and subscribe so you don't miss informative guests like my guest today. And I'm doing a series on advocates. And I have with me today Mika Pollack, who is an advocate. And welcome, Mika, to Chatting with Betsy.
Thank you, Betsy. Thanks for having me today.
You're welcome. So please tell the listeners about your company and why you are an advocate for what you do. That's two loaded questions.
That's okay. I think I'll be able to handle it just fine.
Oh,
so thank you for the short introduction. I'm happy to share more information about our organization. So my name is Mika Pollack again, and I am the founder and executive director of a nonprofit organization called Faces Drug. We are a national organization with a mission to prevent and to alleviate medication-related illness, disability, and death in the United States. We want to do this through work that centers on education, research, and advocacy. And a lot of our work is about making people safer and helping those who have been harmed by medication. But a good deal of our work is also about raising the bar around what does it really mean to be medicated in America. So we're brand new. We were founded last year in early 2019, and we're just getting started. And we're looking forward to making an impact at the national, state, and local level.
I'm really excited about having you on, Mika, because a lot of people wonder, is my medication safe? We hear commercials about various medications, and you're scared to death to take them because the side effects they list are side effects you don't want to have. And you think, well, how safe is this medication?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's something that we have all thought about. Myself personally, I have a background in clinical research. So I've worked on lots of different drug trials, and that was really the inspiration for me to look at medication, injury, and death as a public health issue and to help start an organization of this type. But I think that it's a question that many people think about, whether you're in the industry or you're not, because, there are serious potential safety risks associated with just about any medication on the market. And I think the challenge around this for scientists and healthcare providers and even patients and consumers is the fact that biologically we're all very different. And so how does our body respond to a medication is individually based. But then there's also other things that determine how well we metabolize and respond to a drug. So it could be the food we're eating. It could be how different medications are acting with other medications we're taking for people who are taking more than one. And so there's many different factors to determine the safety. What causes harm, though, is a really big thing that we try to educate people about a safe-ish drug. So when we say people are dying and they're becoming injured or disabled because of a medication, it's kind of a loaded question. But globally what this means is that people are dying and getting injured, whether it's intentional or unintentional. This happens from medication errors, whether it's an error of the patient or the clinician not providing proper instruction or not taking something properly. It could happen because, a drug was poorly researched and we really don't know before it's actually FDA approved how well it's going to behave in large populations as opposed to those controlled smaller subject populations. People also get harmed from medication because we didn't get rid of them properly. We didn't dispose of it. So we had medications lying around the house. and a young little child or, a teenager gets a hold of these medications, and we have an accidental overdose or medication exposure. And then we also have injuries as well, Betsy, because people may be overmedicated, which is actually a significant issue in the U.S., where people are taking more than 3, 4, 5 medications on a regular basis. And science has shown that the more medications we take, the more likely we are to have a serious adverse drug reaction or event that could lead us into the hospital. There's many reasons why people get hurt. Yeah.
Yes. You hear that a lot, especially when someone goes to many doctors, and if they're not in sync with each other, collaborating with each other, you can be over-medicated. And, a good pharmacist is worth your weight in gold when you go to, I won't say the company, but I go to a small independent pharmacy. I mean, it's a chain, but it's small. And he would know, my pharmacist would know immediately if something was going to counteract with something else. But if you, and that, no offense to mail ordering, okay? Don't send me any hate mail about that. But I think if you do like a mail order, they may not be so quick to say, hey, Mika, hey, Betsy, you're taking too much medication here. They're interacting. It could have bad side effects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We call it, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, what is your feelings on that? Sometimes I know you don't have a choice. A person doesn't have a choice with the mail order pharmacy because that's the way your insurance wants you to go. But I feel you don't get the individualized care.
Yeah. No, that's very true, and I think it's something that I'm hoping that Safest Drug can make an impact on. The sad state of affairs with our kind of over-medicating culture in America is the fact that there's lots of patient counseling and information that doesn't transfer to people to know how to take their medications properly. But even more than that, what do you look for? Every single drug that's sold and marketed in the U.S. has specific information on its FDA-approved drug label, which is a PDF document available on FDA.gov, that says this is what healthcare providers should be telling patients about this drug. And there are no laws in so many different states all across this country. They don't require that information to be transferred to patients. And so we are very much in a culture where we're mail ordering medications without information. I've talked to people who have plenty of supply of a particular medication, and the next thing you know, here comes another 90-day supply of the drugs, and they're not even done with halfway through the other supply. And so we have this kind of automated medicating culture that kind of proliferates the situation and doesn't allow us an opportunity to really educate people and for people to kind of slow down with regards to medicating and understand exactly how these medications can impact their body.
That's very true, because with my husband's drug prescription, and I won't say what company, but they would refill like automatically. And he still had it. I had to call up and say, please, we don't need any more, and to, put a stop to it. Another situation that I had, Mika, where, the pharmacist knew his information, and I can't remember the name of the medication. It wasn't really medication. It was like an engineered food. This is going back probably maybe 10 years ago at MAD or 9 years ago. Excuse me. The pharmacist said, Betsy, you don't want Matt to take this yet. He doesn't need this yet. And he says, take this instead. It was an over-the-counter amino acid type of supplement. I'm not exactly sure at this point. It's been so long ago. But he said this would zonk Matt out. And I believed him because I trusted him. He wouldn't tell me that if he wasn't saying the truth. And, this is where communication with the pharmacist is really important. So I I didn't put that on that prescription, and I'm glad I listened to the pharmacist. I know you're a nonprofit, Mika. Would someone contact you? Would I contact you if I had a medication and had a reaction to it?
Well, people do contact us for that reason. It's not the main reason why people contact us, but they could. In general, we try to provide resources for people to do that. So in America, people should be contacting the FDA. So we tend to make sure we provide that messaging in more than one place on our website and our resources. We also have that represented in our very first education campaign, which launched earlier this year, called Ask, Read, Report, where we're asking people basically to ask certain questions of your healthcare provider, particularly the people who are prescribing the drugs. Read certain information and giving people guidance around what information is important, whether it's a package insert or a medication guide, or the report part, which is reporting directly to the FDA. Betsy, a lot of times, and you've seen this, and your audience has probably seen this and heard it many times in a drug ad, they say, if you have a problem with your drug, who do you call? Your doctor. And what we're trying to do is to kind of expand the narrative. It's not just contacting your doctor or the nurse practitioner or the physician assistant who prescribed your drug, but we have to make sure the FDA knows, because ultimately the FDA is the only government agency in this country that has the responsibility to monitor drug product safety and monitor specific issues when it comes to these pharmaceutical drug products. And then the interesting thing that most people don't know is that your doctor or your clinical providers who prescribe your drugs are actually not required to tell the FDA when you tell them. So if you only tell your doctor, it doesn't mean the FDA is going to receive that report. So one thing that we do at Safest Drug is really trying to push that narrative around telling the FDA. But if people contact us and they need help with reporting, we're more than happy to help them with that.
Okay, so your nonprofit is really looking at the safety of the drug medications, the side effects, and your company is like pushing for maybe a stricter regulations and reporting what goes on, the side effects.
Sure.
Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Well, okay.
Somewhat, yeah. So basically what we're trying to do, Betsy, is some of that stuff that you mentioned, but also what we want to do is we make sure that people have the proper education around their medication. We also want to be a part of research, particularly research in the post-marketing world. Most of the money in this country that gets pushed into clinical drug trials is all about putting new medications on the market, or taking old drugs and then giving them new indications, right? But we want to expand upon that to say, what about the drugs that are already on the market? Most money is not developed or put into those types of projects. So there's so much research that can be done on drug safety and how we make people safer, how do we come up with the interventions and make them safer. And then another good part about our mission is the advocacy part. So we want to make sure, as you mentioned, that one day there are federal rules or regulations and standards around requirements on notifying all consumers about safety updates and alerts that happen every week in this country, unbeknownst to so many people, for a drug. If you're taking a drug that's in your cabinet right now, there's no law to say that the manufacturer has to tell you tomorrow that it's been updated with a safety update. We also want to make sure we have state impact. So there's lack of laws that require patients receiving that counseling information at the doctor's office. We also want to see changes around drug ads. Can we make drug ads more transparent? Can we bring in advertisers and publishers to kind of take on like a responsible drug ad pledge to make sure that, we are making sure that drug ads are, putting out the information they should be putting out and not misleading the public. So we want to do a lot around education, research, and advocacy, but the ultimate goal is to make sure people are safer. Right now in the country, over 100,000 people die every year because of a medication, and that number is not even an actual number because we really don't know exactly how many because it's not well tracked and it's not well documented. And then millions of people, one expert group said 2 to 4 million people every year get injured, some permanently because of a medication. So we're constantly looking at that global number, but we're looking at it from many different ways and strategies to tackle the problem.
That's interesting. How did you get a passion for this, Mika?
Well, it's taken about 15 years, Betsy, to be quite honest with you. The very first drug trial I ever stepped on was in 2005, and it was actually on one of those post-marketing study trials where it was about a drug that was being sold to treat asthma in a certain population, and I was asked to be on this research project shortly after graduating with my master's in public health. And they said, Mika, the FDA is requiring this pharma company to research this drug because it could be killing a certain amount of people in this particular population. And we need to help the pharma company as a consulting group to determine if that's true or not. And it was the first time, I think, in my life as an adult that I just never realized that, hey, if a drug is being sold in the pharmacy, you mean to tell me it's under investigation for killing people? Like, how is it still being sold in the pharmacy? And that was kind of my first kind of like intrigue in kind of medications. But it really has taken 15 years to get to this point because since then I've worked on other drug trials for preclinical or pre-marketing drugs. And I've just learned a lot. But it was really the last maybe 4 or 5 years that I started to realize just how, difficult it was in the clinical trial world to determine safety. And we come across so many safety issues in the research environment, which is what we want to do anyway, and identify issues. And I thought, it has to be even a bigger problem outside of the research world. And so I just started kind of like doing my own little research and looking around on weekends and nights over a couple years, and I start just becoming very astounded at the public health implications and the fact that, there really wasn't an organization like Safest Drug that was trying to change what it means to be medicated in America by making consumers safer. I also became more inspired by the fact that if you analogize this with the automobile industry, lots of innovation and implemented regulation happened with automobiles to make sure people who bought cars were safer. And I realized that there really wasn't a whole lot to parallel with that when it comes to people who are buying medications, things that we all depend on in our healthcare system quite heavily. So I just became just personally intrigued by it and just felt like, to me, I want to be on this side of, the lane to do something about this issue that just seems so important. I think that it's just underaddressed.
It is important, Mika. It's very important, and thank you for your nonprofit group and for your advocacy, because I know in my own life I was taking a medication for my GERD, and it was giving me chest pain. And, doctors, they don't believe women as it is. And I stopped taking it, and then I see, it's getting, lawyers are saying, if you took this drug, this medication, you can file, in with a lawsuit because it's been known to cause heart attack and heart problems. And I think that doctors don't want to admit that you can be having a side effect from a medication. I've encountered that, many times. Everyone is different. Everyone's body chemistry is different, so people will react differently.
Yeah, no, it's 100% true.
Yeah, I tell caregivers, because of my audience is a lot of caregivers, that if you see side effects, call your doctor up and tell them, but research the side effects so that you know what you're talking about and you can be firm. For instance, when Matt was taking the Exelon patch and he had to increase, the doctor increased it. A few days later, Matt said, this is when he was able to walk by himself. He said he got dizzy, he felt like he was drunk, and he fell. And I called the doctor, and he said, oh, no, it can't be from that. And I said, well, yes, it can, because I read about it. I did my research. I want Matt on the lower dose that he was before. But I find that doctors give you a hard time And nothing against doctors. There's many wonderful doctors out there. I'm not putting down doctors at all. But I think sometimes they are in cahoots with the pharmaceutical company. I'm going to open up a big Pandora box here. And I don't know if they still do, but, they used to get kickbacks, nice vacations. So they would, what would you call, promote a certain medication, maybe over another company, if this one company was giving them kickbacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, it's still a controversial issue, honestly, Betsy. I mean, just earlier today, we posted on our Facebook page that Reuters had recently, and a number of media outlets had recently shared one of the latest kind of, controversial things coming out of the pharmaceutical world with regards to a very popular drug that we all know called Humira. And how, there was some fraudulent action there, and then an award was basically put forth through the California courts because of that type of fraud. And so, it makes consumers and patients, caregivers, all of us nervous. It makes us question. It makes us kind of, afraid to trust. And we have to protect our bodies, right? Our bodies and the people we love and care for, they're really important. And we know these medications can totally alter a person completely and sometimes permanently. And so it's really important to think about that. But it does damage the trust. I tell people all the time, advocate for yourself. I mean, you did a great job advocating for your husband, and so many other people do that. But it's hard because, you may not have a very warm reception from your clinical provider if you do go to them about adverse drug events. And that's why we also encourage people to, talk to your doctor, talk to your clinician team, but don't forget to tell the FDA because they have to know what's happening to the American public with regard to medications.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned being an advocate, Mika, because I say that on a weekly basis. Mm-hmm. Probably with every interview I do, I, mention that how important it is to be an advocate because of your caregiver. You know your loved one better than a doctor. And if you see strange behaviors and something is amiss, then, it has to be addressed. And even when Matt was taking medication for his hallucinations, the one medication was making him aggressive. Mm-hmm. Well, I shouldn't say aggressive, agitated. So then he has to take another medication to counteract the agitation, which then could cause hallucinations. It's like a round circle, going nowhere.
Right. We call it the prescribing cascade, or I call it the medication snowball.
Yeah.
Because one medication causes one issue, and sometimes it's not even identified that the other medication is causing the issue, Betsy. It's just, you have another issue. And the older you are, the more likely you're going to have health issues. So people were more likely to kind of lay claim on an issue to the fact that you're older or you suffered this injury and not to a medication. But it's very complicated to kind of weave around this world in just healthcare, period, much less weaving in the world in healthcare with regards to a medication. But advocacy is super, super huge. And I do the same thing. I tell people you have to speak up, you have to talk. And if you need help talking or knowing what to look at, you have to tap into the resources of nonprofits, support groups, Facebook groups. They're out there to help you make sure you can advocate for yourself and your family.
Absolutely. I'm going to open up a Pandora box here, Mika, because here in Chatting with Betsy, I talk about the taboo. Now, I'd like to know your opinion with your nonprofit, the COVID vaccination. I'm concerned for myself. Now, this is just only my opinion, listeners. I'm petrified to take a vaccination. I don't know how safe it is. There's side effects to flu vaccination, and last time I had a flu vaccination, a few months later, I came down with the flu. How much testing is going on with this COVID vaccination? Because if they want to know quick, I don't really think they could test it. like they should. That's only my opinion. But how do you feel? What is your company's opinion on that?
Yeah, well, Safest Drug hasn't really taken a specific stance on it just yet. We've been kind of monitoring quietly in the background. So there's COVID vaccine project trackers that we've been looking at. We're also keyed into certain, medical listservs, and we just pay attention to, what's happening in the media with regards to the vaccine development. Now, I will say on a personal note, someone who's actually worked in clinical trials, the world of clinical trials, I was just like you. I mean, I immediately, when I heard how fast-tracked it was going to be, I became concerned, just because I know even when we take years to go through each of the 3 phases before we put in that application to the FDA to get a new drug approved, even when we go through years of that, there's still issues with the medication. There's still unknown safety issues and risks that we don't know yet, and we'll find out over time once the drug's being sold in pharmacies. And so to hear that we're trying to rush it to market, it was concerning. But in the sense of the global pandemic and what's happening in the U.S., the urgency is there. We need something. We need to figure out what we can do to make people safer. But I think that everyone's kind of trying to pay attention to, what will this be? What would it look like? Personally, I think I'm most concerned about the fact that, how would this new vaccine be, shared or be instructed for use with children? I have kids in middle school and high school. And so, will this vaccine be mandatory for kids to go back to school? How much safety data is really there? So I think that, what I'm looking forward to and what I think Safest Drug would also want to be invested in is looking at the true safety around the drug, looking at the safety data, and looking at those safety reports and disseminating that and sharing that with the public. Part of our job at Safest Drug is to kind of lower some of this technicality of what's happening around medication and safety and put it in layman's terms and so people understand this is what this means. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what the safety data is and finding out who they actually recruited in these trials, because that's a whole other issue and one that we're actually trying to advocate for as well, which is more diversity in clinical drug trials. Right now in our country, it's been decades since the FDA was first founded, and there's never been any mandatory diversity standards and subjects when it comes to privately funded pharmaceutical studies. So, a lot of times because of genetic and individual differences, we don't know how a drug will behave in all populations. And so I think that's also another huge thing that I like to see within the vaccine data, who was actually dosed with this vaccine and what made the study teams determine that it's safe for everybody.
Yes, I'm really leery about that. I mean, I have taken like the shingles vaccination and the pneumonia vaccination. When I worked in a state facility, I had to do the hepatitis B vaccination. Mm-hmm. That was mandatory. But I just don't like taking medicine myself personally, because I'm very sensitive. What would you say is the number one thing you would like the public to know about your nonprofit? Like to stick in their mind.
Yeah. I think number one would be that medication injuries and deaths is a very real public health issue in America. It's under-addressed, but we can change that. We can change that by bringing people into the mission, by making sure people understand why it's so important to pay attention to the safety risks around a medication. And I think for your audience, particularly the caregiver audience, I think one thing I would love for them to know is that, there should be an awareness around the medications you're providing to your loved ones. And just like I mentioned earlier in our talk that, every week, every month, medication labels are being updated with new safety risk updates, there's a way for even caregivers to kind of tap into that. We have a resource page on our website, safestdrug.org, where you can basically, look at new safety updates, and you can actually sign up for email from the FDA's website. So as soon as those updates come out, it goes right into your email inbox, and you can take a look at it and see if your loved one's taking that medication, and you'll be up to date more than anyone else on when those new safety updates come out about a medication that's being sold in the pharmacies.
Well, thank you. That is good to know. I was just thinking when you were talking about medication and advertisement, there was a certain medication for Alzheimer's, or maybe it was just dementia in general, and it said it slows the disease down, which was not true. So then people think, oh, this medication will slow the progression down. And actually, we were told this with my mother-in-law, but that's back, 18 years ago. I was told that with Matt. My mom was told that with my father. So the drug companies, the pharmaceuticals, were saying, oh, it slows down the progression, and it didn't. So they had to stop saying that. Because it was false advertising.
Yeah, which is
because
always good to do.
Yeah, because I was really under the impression that, this medication would slow down the progression, but it doesn't. It just manages the symptoms, and this is what they need to tell people and make them aware that it does not slow it down. And I think they're, doctors are getting much better in saying that and being more honest and forthcoming with it. And I think that the medical profession really needs to listen to the patient and or caregiver that, this person's having a side effect, or I'm having a side effect. And I want to tell the listeners, listen, if you yourself are having side effects, you need to call your doctor immediately, because you don't want to fool around. It's nothing to fool around with. And if they shoo you off, say, no, I did my research. This is how I feel. This is my symptoms, and I don't want to be on this medication, and maybe they can prescribe something else.
That's a very good point,
Betsy.
I think it's an excellent point. As a matter of fact, I would even say that from the FDA's perspective, based on the advisory they have on their website, they want people to call them or email them or send an online report for suspected and confirmed. So even if you think something is linked, it doesn't have to be confirmed by your doctor. It could just be something that's concerning to you or your loved one, that this doesn't feel comfortable. This feels painful, or this feels odd. And you can call them, and they will take your report. Their number actually is 1-800-332-1088. But you can also send in, an online report, and we have that on our website as well, or do a paper form, mail it in or fax it. So there's many ways to send it in, but I agree with you completely.
Thank you. Oh, I'll tell you, the time goes by so fast. Thank you, Mika. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing this important information and what consumers need to be aware of. It will be in the blog, but can you just mention, for those who may not read the blog, where they can contact you?
Sure. Our website, Safest Drug, is safestdrug.org, and I can be reached through email at mika@safestdrug.org. You can also contact our general email inbox at contact@safestdrug.org. And I appreciate you having me on the show today. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Oh, well, that would be awesome, because you know what? When this vaccination comes out and we'll see how people start having side effects, well, I definitely will have to have you on. Anytime you want to come on, you just let me know. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing important information. Okay, listeners, this is why you need to subscribe to Chatting with Betsy, because I have important people on that are very informative. You know, I didn't know to call the FDA about drug interaction or drug side effect. I did not know that. So I learned something myself. This is why I had the guests that I have on, because I want people to be aware of topics and topics that people do not want to talk about or they're afraid to talk about. Let's blow the lid off, folks. You know, if something causes a side effects, let's talk about it. And I want to thank you again, Mika, and best wishes to you and your company. And in a world where you could be anything, folks, be kind. And I want to thank Jeanne White again. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passion World Talk Radio, for having this great opportunity for a platform for people to be able to speak their truth without fear. And until we chat again, this is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy at Passion World Talk Radio. And I really would appreciate it if you would subscribe to my shows, because you don't want to miss this important information. And thanks again, everybody. Till we chat again, be blessed. Bye-bye now.